Hello. So today we're going to look at how is the global climate changing. Now please make sure your phone is off so as not to distract you. You've not got the TV or any music on in the background. You're not playing any games, and you have a pen and paper to take notes. Occasionally you may see this yellow banner appearing across the screen. At that time I would like you to pause the video to complete the task. You can pause the video now to make sure you have all your equipment ready, and when you are ready, press play. So you might have seen some of these newspaper headlines over the last few years, or images of polar bears running out of ice to hunt on, and lots of factories spewing out lots of gases into the atmosphere. And they are all connected. They're all linked to climate change and global warming. So if we have a look at the Earth's temperature over the last however many years, so we can see back here from back in 1000 AD, average global temperature in the red line is about 13.8 degrees, and it stays around there. It does go higher and lower. We do get times where the Earth gets gradually warmer and gradually colder in a bit of a cycle, but it's staying around about that same temperature, around about 13.7 degrees. We look at the blue line, which shows the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Again, that stays about constant, about 280 parts per million. Then around 1800, the amount of carbon dioxide starts increasing dramatically. It goes up very, very quickly. We notice at the same time that the Earth's average temperature also increases over that time. And we've seen that over the last, particularly the last 100 years, the average global temperature is rising rapidly. We've gone from being about 13.6 degrees in 1900 to in 2000 we've been up to 14.4 degrees, so almost a rise of 1 degree in 100 years. If we look at the previous 900 years, we've not really had much of a change. Now scientists predict that if nothing is done, we could get a temperature change of 5.8 degrees by 2100 if nothing is done. And there is a link between carbon dioxide concentration and average global temperature. And we're pretty sure it is a causation, not just a correlation. Changes in the global temperature can have severe effects on weather patterns around the world. So we get global warming, which leads us to climate change. So our changing weather conditions, that climate change, we can get the ice caps melting, which cause sea levels to rise. This is because the global temperature is increasing, therefore the ice caps begin to melt and cause sea levels to rise, which increases the risk of flooding, especially in those low-lying countries such as the Netherlands or coastal places. It also decreases habitat, particularly for those animals that live either on islands or by the coast, or live at the polar ice caps. So things like polar bears and penguins are running out of space to live and also running out of food. We get increasingly common severe weather conditions. So this is things such as hurricanes. We can get droughts as well. And we're seeing more and more of them at odd times of the year. We can see changes in the amount of rainfall. We can get increased rainfall, or we can get decreased rainfall. So it just changes. It's not always just increased, it's not just decreased. But this can lead to droughts, which means it's harder to grow crops. Or it can lead to flooding as well if we get too much rainfall, which again can lead to destruction of crops, or it can lead to the destruction of habitats. And finally, we can get changes to biodiversity. Looking at these first three, if we are changing the ecosystem, so if we have a change in the ecosystem, we can affect the number of producers. So we can get a decreased number of producers. Less producers means less food for consumers, so we get less consumers. They're either going to leave the local ecosystem, so either through migration, they'll go somewhere else where there is more food, or they will become extinct. They cannot survive. We also get, with severe weather conditions, if we have droughts, it can get too hot. They cannot adapt to the environment. So change in the environment as well. And our animals can't adapt. They can't adapt, they will go extinct. Now you might be thinking, well, what can we do about it? This is actually quite bad. You know, if we're running out of food, our temperatures are increasing, we're getting rid of that biodiversity, there must be things that we can do. And you'll be pleased to know there are. To do it, we need to make sure we control and reduce the amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere. There's less carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere, and we reduce it, the average global temperature will come down. Now, for most people, this means reducing their carbon footprint. You can find out your own carbon footprint online. There are free carbon footprint calculators. Very, very good to see how much your carbon footprint is and how much ideally it should be to help the world reduce it. Now, you might be saying, well, what is a carbon footprint? I've heard of that term, but I'm not entirely sure what it is. Now, a carbon footprint is the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases emitted by our actions. So by our actions, I mean things like driving. If you drive in a car, you're driven in a car, going on planes, so a flight somewhere. The food that we eat, it is delivered, it's packaged, and it is grown or farmed. It all contributes to our carbon footprint. There are several things we can do to it. There are individual and international things that we can do about it. Individually, we can change to a vegan diet. So if we change to a vegan diet, we can reduce our carbon footprint. We can reduce our energy usage. So making sure our lights are turned off, making sure we're not using so much heating, that will reduce our carbon footprint. We can increase our use of public transport. So if we're not driving in many places, if you get a bus or a train, that will massively reduce your carbon footprint. Now, internationally, this is where actually we can see a lot of big changes happening, especially if whole countries are able to do it. Now, the world leaders will meet regularly to discuss targets for reduction. You might be aware that in the news, the United States recently pulled out of one of the agreements, saying that it would harm their own country. It would harm industries within their country economically. Countries can also make us plant new trees. The UK is currently trying to plant 1 million trees. We plant those trees because they will remove carbon dioxide through photosynthesis. We can have incentives for populations to reduce their carbon footprint, such as taxing high polluting vehicles, encouraging people to invest in home insulation, in solar panels, all things that can work. And we can invest in new technologies to reduce carbon dioxide emissions as well. One of those is called the carbon capture and storage. Now, with carbon capture and storage, the CO2 that is produced from power stations is captured, it's not released into the atmosphere, and it is pumped underground, so deep underground, to be absorbed by porous rocks. Now, see, we have positives for this. We have less CO2 being produced, or being released. The same amount is still being produced, but less is being released. A negative of this, though, we have an increased cost. They reckon to do it, it's by about 10%, so energy bills would get 10% more expensive. We also run the risk of damaging the rocks and causing issues underground. But the main negative there is the cost, what people are most affected by. Now you might be wondering, how does eating less meat reduce carbon emissions, particularly that going onto a vegan diet? I'm going to show you now with the aid of some diagrams. So this green square here, we imagine this is the amount of land that is needed to feed a vegan. Very, very small amount of land. The only thing we've got on there are crops growing, plants growing, that will photosynthesize and will remove carbon dioxide. So we have a small space. If we actually were to look at it, it is about 1/8 of an acre. Very, very small space. And it is filled with plants that photosynthesize. So they are removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We now look at how much a vegetarian would need. So a vegetarian, someone who just doesn't eat meat but will still consume animal products such as eggs or milk or butter, they need 3 times the land. 3 times the land. We've suddenly got a lot more land being used for someone who is a vegetarian to provide it. And we do still have a lot of plants, but there will also be animals on there providing some of those products. Those animals, such as cows, produce a lot of methane. They also respire and produce carbon dioxide. Finally, we're going to have a look at an omnivore, so someone who eats both vegetarian or vegetables and meat. They need a much larger amount of land. They need 18 times the size of the land of a vegan. It is much, much larger. The reason for this is because of all the livestock. All of that livestock will be respiring and producing carbon dioxide. If they eat beef, so cattle, produce a lot of methane. Methane is a very, very bad greenhouse gas that contributes massively to global warming. We can see if we had a vegan, everyone became vegan, we've suddenly got an extra 17 plots of land per person that we can plant trees on to act for photosynthesis. We can spread out housing to reduce the heating effect from different cities. However, to do that means that you have to force everyone to become vegan, which as a society we are not able to do. We cannot force people what to eat. So we now have some questions for you to have a go at answering. I would like you to pause the video to answer the questions. When you're ready, you can play and we will look at the answers. If you are still watching, you should be ready to mark question 1. I'm now going to move on to the next questions. Please pause the video to answer the questions. When you are ready, please press play. You should now be watching if you have answered the questions. The answers are coming up for you to mark. I am now going to move on to the next questions. If you still need time to mark, please pause the video now. Please pause the video to answer the questions. You should now be playing the video if you're ready to mark your answers. We're now going to move on to the next question. Please pause the video to answer the questions. You should now only be watching if you are ready to mark your answers. Thank you very much for watching the video. I hope it has been informative and you understand the content and have answered the questions well. If not, please go and watch the video again to help you answer the questions. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Have a good day and stay safe.